The knock was sharp enough to pull him from a dream, the kind that leaves a heaviness in the chest. He sat up, boots still on from the night before, and stared at the door as if it might speak before he reached it. The rain was steady outside, a low hiss on the roof. When he opened it, she was there, hair wet, dress clinging, eyes fixed on him like she had been waiting for him to answer all her life. She said she came to clean the coin. Her voice was steady, but her breath wasn't. He leaned against the frame, letting the cold drift in. "You know whose house this is?" She said she didn't care. "You should," he said. "It matters." She looked past him into the room. "I can work quietly," she said. He thought about closing the door, but her gaze didn't move. It stayed locked on the shadow behind him, the one cast by the table. He stepped aside. She walked in. She didn't ask where to start. She set her bag down, rolled her sleeves, and began with the table, wiping along the grain, pausing at a dark spot where the wood was scorched. Her fingers lingered there too long, he noticed. Never seen burn marks before. She didn't answer, just kept wiping. Then she moved to the stove, lifting the pot lid, leaning down to smell. No one did that unless they had a reason. "You've been here before," he said. She shook her head, eyes on the iron. "Feels familiar," she said. "Places don't feel familiar unless you've stood in them," he told her. She ran the rag along the shelf, touching the handle of his father's knife. Her thumb brushed the worn wood as if counting the lines. He moved closer. "You carry a name." "Marla," she said. "You?" "Doesn't matter," he said. She looked at him then, a flicker of something in her face, as if she recognized him from somewhere she shouldn't. He stepped back. "Water?" she asked. Her voice was different now, not soft, not polite. It shook, but not from fear. He pointed to the bucket. She poured herself a cup and drank in small swallows. Her hands were steady, but her eyes weren't. "What's in the barn?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Tools. Hey, nothing else?" "Why?" She shrugged. "Heard something." "From where?" "From the road," she said. He let the answer sit, then said, "What road?" "All of them," she said, and that was the end of it. She worked in silence after that, moving in a slow, methodical circle around the room. He watched her from the corner, wondering if she knew how much she was giving away by not speaking. He had seen women like her before, women who showed up at doors, wet from the rain, looking for a bed or a meal or work, but she wasn't asking for food, and she didn't seem tired. She was measuring the space like she was counting steps. "Rain's letting up," he said. She didn't look outside. "Doesn't change anything." He asked what that meant. "Means I'm not." "Done," she said. By dusk, the floor was clean, the stove cold, and the table set back in place. She gathered her bag. He thought she'd leave. She didn't. "I need to stay the night," she said. No hesitation, no excuse about the weather, just a fact. "You got family here?" he asked. "No." "Friends?" "No." "Then why here?" She looked at the knife on the shelf. "Because it's where I stopped," she said. He let the silence stretch, waiting for more. There wasn't any. "You trust me to let you stay?" he asked. "You trust me to walk away?" she said. That made him laugh once, short and without humor. "You talk like you're owed something." "I'm not owed," she said. "I'm collecting." He felt something shift then, something small but sure, like a door closing inside the room. He said she could take the chair by the stove. She said she'd take the floor. He didn't argue. He knew people who preferred the ground to a bed. When night settled in, he lay on his cot, eyes on the ceiling, listening to her breathe. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavier. He thought he heard her get up once, footsteps soft toward the door. He waited for it to open. It didn't. The steps came back. She didn't speak again that night, and neither did he. But he could feel the shape of her questions hanging in the air, questions she hadn't asked yet, questions he wasn't ready to answer. The stove ticked as it cooled. Somewhere outside, the barn creaked in the wind. He closed his eyes, telling himself he'd look in there in the morning, even though he already knew he wouldn't. The fire popped and hissed as the wood settled, throwing short bursts of light across the room. She was on her knees near the hearth, scrubbing slowly, the rag moving in small, deliberate circles. He sat in the chair, one boot heel propped on the rung, watching the way her eyes didn't always follow her hands. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Past the ridge." "That's all?" She wrung the rag out hard, water dripping back into the bucket. "That's enough." He leaned forward. "Plenty past the ridge." "Which part?" She shrugged without looking up. "The part that's gone." The answer landed heavier than the words deserved, and he let it pass. She kept working, but her head turned now and then toward the barn window, the one that caught the last of the evening light. "You keep looking out there," he said. "Do I?" "Yeah." She sat back on her heels, pushing wet hair from her face. "What's in it?" "Tools. Hay. Nothing worth stealing." "Wasn't asking to steal." He met her eyes, holding them until she went back to the floor. The fire cracked again, louder this time. "What time do you usually sleep?" she asked. "Why?" "Just wondering." "Late enough." "How late?" "Depends who's asking." She glanced over her shoulder, a ghost of a smile on her face. "Me." "Then later than you think," he said. She kept her head down, but the question came again, 10 minutes later. Same tone, same tilt of her head. "What time?" He set his jaw. "When the work's done." She moved to the corner, scrubbing harder than before, shoulders tight. "Work's never done," she said. "That's the point." The bucket water had turned dark by the time she straightened and pressed her palms against her knees. "I need to stay the night." He didn't answer right away. The request wasn't dressed in apology or excuse. It was bare, like the boards under her. "You said you were just cleaning the coin," he said. "I did." "That change." "I don't have anywhere to be before morning." He watched her pick up the bucket, carry it to the door, and step outside into the cooling air. The sky was fading, blue sliding into black. She dumped the water slowly, as if she was afraid of making a sound. When she came back in, she stood near the fire, drying her hands on the skirt of her dress. He could feel her measuring him again, same as when she first stepped through the door. "You could stay in town," he said. "I could," she answered. "You could walk past the ridge again." "Could." "Then why here?" Her eyes went to the barn again, quick enough he almost missed it. "Because this is where I stopped." "Are you planning to leave in the morning?" "Depends." "On?" "If you want me gone." He leaned back, the chair creaking under him. "I didn't say that." "Then I'll stay." The firelight caught her face in a way that made her look older, or maybe just more tired. He wondered if she'd been sleeping at all lately, or if she was the kind of person who listened for trouble all night. "Are you sure you trust me?" he asked. "Are you sure you trust me?" she replied, and there was no smile this time. Neither spoke after that. She spread her blanket near the wall, folding herself down onto it with the ease of someone who had done it before in stranger places. He banked the fire, the room dimming until only the glow in the hearth remained. She lay on her side, facing him. He lay on his cot, facing her. Between them, the air felt too still, like the house was holding its breath. Outside, a branch scraped against the siding. She didn't flinch. He noticed. "Cold?" he asked. "No." "Hungry?" "No." He shut his eyes, but sleep didn't come. He could hear her breathing, even and measured, but it didn't sound like rest. Somewhere in the distance, the barn let out a long, low groan as the wind shifted. He opened his eyes. Her eyes were open too. Neither of them spoke, but both listened to the same thing, the sound from outside that neither was ready to name. He didn't know why he'd said yes. Maybe because she hadn't begged. Maybe because the way she stood in the doorway felt like a question he wasn't supposed to answer yet. Whatever the reason, the night was already set, and whatever came with it would come for both of them. The sound came before the light, iron-rimmed wheels grinding against the ruts, the heavy clop of a slow horse. He was already at the table, boot tapping. She froze by the stove, rag in hand, eyes cutting toward the window. The sheriff's wagon rolled past, the man himself glancing in without slowing. "You know him?" he asked. Her voice was flat. "I know what men like him do." He watched her shoulders, the way they held themselves too high, too tight. "If you want to keep men like that away, there's only one way that works." She set the rag down. "What way?" "Marry fast." Her head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing like he'd insulted her. "That's your idea of protection?" "It's not an idea. It's how things are." "Sounds like trading one trouble for another." "Sometimes you pick the trouble you can live with." She stared, like she was measuring if he was serious. He didn't look away. "You're not smiling," she said. "Not a thing to smile about." The wagon had stopped somewhere down the road. She could hear the sheriff's voice carrying, low but sharp. "Why would you even offer?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because a married woman under my roof is left alone. One they think's passing through gets questions. Questions you don't want answered. Her jaw tightened. And what do you get? Quiet, order, maybe fewer knocks in the night. She let the silence hang between them, only the fire popping. You're not joking. No. Then say it. Marry me. She blinked once, slowly, then looked at the door. Now. Before he comes back. It wasn't the kind of moment that needed more talking. She picked up her coat, pulled it on, and stood there a second longer. You don't know my name, she said. I'll learn it when the preacher writes it down. They stepped outside. The morning was pale, damp, the dirt road soft from the night's rain. The sheriff's wagon was a dark shape disappearing over the ridge. They walked the other way, toward the small clapboard building at the edge of town. The preacher was sweeping the steps when they arrived. He looked from one to the other, broom pausing midair. Short notice, he said. Write us in, the man said. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. The preacher opened a thick book, flipping to a blank line. Names? His first, she said. He gave it, short and clipped. She followed with hers, and he looked at her as though it didn't suit her face. Witnesses? The preacher asked. No time, the man said. Just write it. They stood side by side, hands at their sides, while the preacher read the words. She answered steady, eyes forward. He answered the same. The pen scratched their names into the paper. The preacher shut the book. That's it? She asked. That's it, the preacher said. No kisses, no ring, no celebration, just a creak of the floorboards as they turned and walked back out into the thin light. On the road back, they didn't speak. Her boots sank a little in the mud. His hands stayed in his pockets. The town slipped away behind them until only the ridge and the long stretch of land to his cabin remained. At the porch, she stopped. It feels strange, she said. What does? Knowing it's done. You wanted more words? No, she said. Just thought I'd feel different. You will, he said. She looked past him toward the barn again, same as before. You'll tell me what's in there someday. Maybe. The fire inside had burned low, the air warm but fading. She hung her coat, set her hands on the table, and traced the grain with her fingertips. He poured water into 2 cups, slid one toward her. You're not going to thank me, he said. You didn't thank me either, she replied. For what? For not running. He thought about that as he drank. Her eyes stayed on him, steady now. No flinch when the wind rattled the window. Whatever had started with a knock at his door had changed shape in a single morning. They were bound now, strangers on paper, but something else in the air between them, something neither of them was ready to name. Back in the cabin, the air felt different, not warmer, not colder, just carrying something new neither of them named. She went straight to the stove, pulling the pot from the shelf, laying out flour, salt, and a small bundle of dried herbs from her bag. He set the door latch on the table, tools beside it, the metal hinge clicking softly in his hands. The smell of bread came first, then the sizzle of fat in the pan. She moved without hurry, sleeves rolled, hair falling forward. Every so often, her gaze drifted to the window, past him, to the dark outline of the barn. He didn't comment at first. You keep looking out there, he said finally, not looking up from the latch. Do I? Since we got back. She stirred the pot. I thought I saw something move in the hay. What kind of something? Didn't get in shape, just movement. Mice, he said. She shook her head. Too tall for mice. He tightened the latch screw, wiped his hand on his pants. Wind moves hay, he said. The wind doesn't breathe. That pulled his eyes to her. She didn't flinch. He let the words sit, picked up the latch again, and worked the hinge until it moved smoothly. By the time he was done, she had bread on the board, steam rising. He sat at the table while she set the plate in front of him, then sat across. They didn't speak while they ate. The bread was soft, the stew rich enough to hide the fact it had been stretched thin. Halfway through, her gaze slid back to the barn. He didn't turn this time. Are you planning on going out there yourself? He asked. Depends. On. If you're going to. I'll look in the morning. Might be too late. For what? She didn't answer. When the plates were empty, she cleared them without a word, setting them in the wash basin. He finished the last of the bread, leaning back in his chair. She dried her hands and stood there for a moment, eyes on the fire. You always keep it this quiet, she asked. I like hearing what's coming. Ever miss something? He thought about it. Not twice. The fire popped, a sharp crack. She moved to her blanket near the wall, smoothing it out. He banked the fire, the shadows stretching higher across the walls. When the room was dark, but for the red glow in the hearth, he lay back on the cot. She lay on her side, facing the wall. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint creak of the barn boards. He was nearly asleep when he heard it, soft, uneven, too high-pitched for an animal. It was faint at first, then steadier. A child's cry, carried thin in the night air. He sat up, boots on, coat pulled over his shoulders. The floorboards barely groaned under his weight. She didn't move as he passed, but he felt her eyes on him. Outside, the cold bit at his face. The barn loomed ahead, its shadow longer than the building itself. He crossed the yard, lantern swinging low. The door groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was heavy with hay and old dust. He lifted the lantern, casting light across the stalls. Nothing moved. The hay sat in neat piles, shadows curling around them. "Hello?" he said, voice low. Only the rustle of the rafters answered. He walked the length of the barn, checked each corner, each pile of hay. No child, no movement, just the stillness that comes when a place is holding something back. When he stepped outside again, the air was quiet. The cry was gone, if it had been there at all. He stood in the yard, listening until the cold worked into his hands. Back inside, he hung the coat and set the lantern down. She was awake, propped on one elbow. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing you could see," she replied. He didn't answer, just lay back on the cot. The fire was nearly out, leaving the room in shadow. Her eyes stayed open longer than his, watching the door, as if the next knock might not come from a hand at all. It started the same way, soft at first, just enough to make him think it was wind cutting through the cracks. Then it came again, sharper, closer, the kind of sound that pulled at the back of the mind. He was on his feet before he realized, boots pulling on by habit, lantern in hand. The door gave a low groan as he stepped outside. The yard was washed in thin moonlight, the frost on the grass catching it like dull glass. The barn sat ahead, dark and still, but the sound rose from that direction, small and uneven, the cry of something that didn't belong in the night. He pushed the barn door open. The hinges whined, loud enough to feel wrong. The lantern's glow spread slowly, catching motes of dust that hung in the cold air. The smell of hay and old wood closed around him. The cry came again from the far stall. He moved toward it, each step sinking into the soft scatter of straw. The air felt heavier the closer he got, as if the space itself wanted him to turn back. Something shifted in the hay. He stopped, held the lantern higher. The pile near the wall trembled, then rolled slightly, spilling a small bundle into view. It was no larger than his forearms, wrapped tight in cloth. He crouched, lantern low. The cloth was pale, worn soft with use, but stitched at one corner was an emblem, a star with long points, its edges ringed in dark thread. He didn't recognize it, but it looked deliberate, almost ceremonial. The bundle moved. A tiny hand pushed against the fabric, then a face turned toward the light. The eyes blinked slowly, unfocused. A baby. He didn't move right away, just knelt there, listening to the small, wet breaths. The air seemed to fold in on itself, the cry replaced by the soft, almost silent sounds of the child shifting against the swaddle. "You weren't supposed to find her yet." The voice came from behind. He turned, the lantern swinging. She stood in the doorway, hair unbound, face pale in the lamplight. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold. "What is this?" he asked. Her eyes went to the child. "She's mine. You left her in the barn. She's safer here." "From what?" She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air seemed tighter now, as though the walls had moved in. "From them." "Who's them?" "You don't want to know." "I do now." Her jaw tightened. "If you'd waited, I'd have told you when it was time. Now you've made it dangerous." He looked down at the baby again. "Dangerous how?" "The emblem," she said, nodding toward the corner of the swaddle. "It means she's theirs. They'll come for her." He ran his thumb over the stitching. "Are you planning on explaining who they are?" She shook her head. "Not tonight." "That's not good enough." Her voice was steady now, but low. "You think you found her. You didn't. She's been here, waiting. I just didn't want you to see." "Why not?" "Because the minute you saw her, you'd have to choose." He stood, a lantern between them. "Choose what?" "Whether you keep her safe or keep yourself safe." The barn felt colder than when he'd walked in, the kind of cold that comes from inside the bones. The baby shifted, a soft sound escaping her. "She's not a secret you can bury," she said. "They'll come whether you tell them no or not. And if I hand her over, you won't." "You seem sure." Her eyes didn't leave his. "Because you opened the swaddle enough to see her face." He didn't answer. The lantern's flame hissed in the still air. Somewhere above, the rafters creaked, as if something had shifted in the dark. He took a step toward her. "You're going to tell me everything." "Not here." "Then where?" "Inside," she said, glancing at the barn door. "Before the wrong ears hear." He hesitated, then passed her the lantern. She took it without a word. He bent, lifting the bundle carefully. The weight was light, fragile enough to make his hands feel clumsy. The baby gave a soft sigh against his chest. They stepped out into the cold. The yard was empty, the moon caught in the frost again. He looked toward the ridge, half expecting to see movement. Nothing. Inside, the fire was low but warm. She set the lantern down, watching him lay the baby on the chair cushion. Neither spoke for a long moment. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You weren't supposed to find her yet." He didn't look at her. Too late for that. He stood by the chair where the baby lay, the swaddle pulled tight, the strange stitched star catching the firelight. His voice was low but edged. "You're going to start talking." She didn't move from the doorway. "About what?" "About why there's a child in my barn." "She's mine. That's the first thing you've said straight." Her hands tightened on the frame, knuckles pale. "She's not safe to claim. Not now." "Safe from what?" "Not what." "Who?" He took the swaddle between his fingers, tracing the star. "This means something." She swallowed. "The White Star family." The name was enough to make him pause. "That's old money." "And dangerous power." He looked at her hard. "You worked for them?" "Yes." "You stole from them." Her voice sharpened. "I took back what was mine." He stepped closer, the swaddle still in his hands. "You're telling me this is your blood, and they've got a claim on her?" "They think they do." "Because of this mark." She nodded once. "Every child born under their roof is theirs until they say otherwise. Doesn't matter who the mother is." He felt the weight of the air change. "And by marrying you, I just stepped into their game." "They'll see it that way," she said. He let the swaddle fall back over the baby's chest. That sheriff's visit wasn't casual. Number he works for them. And the governor, same chain, different link. He turned toward the fire, running a hand down his face. "You should have told me before I put my name next to yours in that book." "You wouldn't have done it." "Damn right." She took a step forward. "And then what?" "You'd have sent me out into the road with her? Alone?" "I might have had a choice." "You still do," she said, her voice softer now. "Help me hide her." He looked back at the baby. She was quiet, eyes half closed, her breathing slow. "Hide her where? This town's got more ears than walls." "There's a place past the ridge," she said. "They don't go there." "Why not?" "Because even they're afraid of what's past it." He studied her face, looking for the lie. "That's not much of an answer." "It's the only one I've got." He moved toward her. "What happens if they find her here?" "They'll take her, and anyone who tried to keep her." "Meaning me." She nodded. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. "And you've been planning this since you knocked on my door." "Planning?" "Number hoping." "Hoping what?" "That you'd be the kind of man who'd hear her cry and not walk away." The words sat between them, too heavy to ignore. The baby shifted, letting out a small sound. He glanced at her, then back at the woman. "You're asking me to put my neck under the same blade you've been running from." "Yes." "And if I say no?" Her voice didn't waver. "Then I'll take her and be gone before the sun's up." He stared at her for a long moment, the fire snapping in the quiet. "You're not afraid to die for her, are you?" "I'm afraid she'll grow up thinking no one ever tried." He exhaled, slow. "What's past the ridge?" "A farm that's been empty for years. The man who owned it. No one goes near it now. And you can get there without them knowing, if we leave tonight." He looked at the latch on the door, the shadow of the barn through the window, the ridge beyond that. "If we do this, there's no coming back." "I know." He glanced at the baby one more time. The stitched star seemed to catch fire even in the shadows. "Get what you need. We leave when the moon's high." She didn't move at first, just stood there watching him, as if measuring whether he meant it. Then she nodded once and slipped toward her blanket. He stayed by the fire, listening to her quiet movements, the faint rustle of cloth as she packed. The baby stirred once, a small sound breaking the stillness, but didn't cry. When she came back to the table, her bag was slung over her shoulder. "You sure?" she asked. "No," he said. "But we're doing it anyway." The knock came just as the sun cut high over the ridge, sharp and deliberate. He was at the table, hands still around a half-empty cup, when she froze near the stove. Her fingers tightened around the rag she'd been using, the knuckles pale. Another knock, slower this time, but heavier. He stood, motioning her to stay put, and opened the door. The sheriff filled the frame, hat low against the glare, dust still on his boots. "Afternoon," he said, voice calm as a pond. "Afternoon," the man answered. "Mind if I step in?" "That depends on why you're here." The sheriff's mouth tipped into something close to a smile. "Routine call. Folks have been seeing strangers on the road, just making sure all's as it should be." "All's fine." The sheriff's gaze slid past him into the room. "Don't suppose you've had any company?" The woman hadn't moved. Her hands were clasped in front of her now, fingers tight together, the rag gone. "No company," the man said. The sheriff stepped over the threshold anyway. Slow, like the air inside was thicker. His eyes moved from the hearth to the table. To her. "Ma'am," he said. She nodded, the barest movement. "You've been here a long time." "A while." "Not from around here, though." "No." He studied her, the silence stretching. "Any reason you'd be looking out toward the barn when I knocked?" Her lips parted just slightly, but no words came. "She wasn't," the man said. "Funny," the sheriff murmured, though I caught a glance that way. He took another step, boots scuffing the floor. "Anything in there I ought to know about?" "Hey," the man said. "Tools." "No stock." "No." The sheriff's eyes didn't leave the man's face. "Mind if I look?" "I do mind," the man said evenly. They stood like that, the room caught in the stillness. Finally, the sheriff's smile returned, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Can't blame a man for asking." He turned toward her again. "You cook?" "Yes." "Good bread smells carry far." "Don't recall inviting you to eat," the man said. The sheriff laughed once, short. "Wasn't asking." He moved back toward the door, the light cutting across him. On the porch, he paused. "Do you hear anything at night?" "Coyotes," the man said. "Anything else?" "No." The sheriff adjusted his hat. "Well, if you do, you let me know. Stray things have a way of wandering where they shouldn't." He tipped his hat then, but his eyes weren't in the gesture. They were on her and then briefly on the barn. The man didn't move until the wagon rolled out of sight down the road. Only then did he close the door. Her hands fell to her sides, but the tremor stayed in her fingers. "He knows," she said. "He suspects." "That's worse." He walked to the window, scanning the road. "We need to be gone before he has reason to come back." Her eyes went to the barn. "Tonight?" "Tonight," he said. She crossed her arms as though holding herself together. "He'll follow. Then we make it hard." The rest of the day moved slow, the hours thick. She kept near the fire, packing small things into her bag when he wasn't looking. He made 2 trips to the barn, checking the gear, the horse, the shadows in the corners. Near dusk, the wind picked up, carrying the dry scent of the ridge. She stepped out onto the porch, staring at the horizon. "He'll be back," she said quietly. He joined her, following her gaze. "Not if we're gone first," but neither of them sounded convinced. She fell asleep near the fire, her blanket pulled up to her chin, one hand resting on the floor as if she'd dropped it mid-thought. He sat at the table in the dim, the lantern turned low. The bag she'd been carrying since the day she knocked on his door was set just under the chair, the strap wound tight around the leg, like she meant to keep it close, even in sleep. For a long while, he only looked at it. The wind outside rattled the boards. The fire shifted, giving off a low pop. Then he reached down and slid the bag toward him. The leather was worn smooth in places, cracked in others. The clasp came undone without a sound. Inside there was little. A cloth bundle, a small tin box, a folded scrap of paper with a length of ribbon tied around it. He left those untouched. At the very bottom, between the lining and the edge of the bag, his fingers caught on something thin. A letter, folded more times than it should have been, the paper soft with age. He unfolded it slowly, flattening the creases enough to read by the thin lantern light. Eleanor. That was the name signed at the bottom. The words above it were written in a hand that pressed too hard, as if the pen had been wielded more like a blade. The letter spoke of a child, not hers to keep, but hers to bear, of a night when the child was taken from her arms before she could even speak the name she'd chosen, of a man who had promised to keep the child safe and who had vanished the next day. It spoke of a debt that could not be measured in coin, only in blood or silence. He read it twice, the words cutting deeper the second time. No dates, no location, no explanation for who Eleanor was or what she meant to the woman now sleeping by his fire. No mention of the White Star family, but the tone, the sense of something owned, traded, bound, was the same. He looked over at her. She hadn't moved. The baby lay in the chair beside her, swaddled in the marked cloth, chest rising and falling in small, steady breaths. He read the line again, blood or silence, and wondered which one she thought she was working toward. Folding the letter, he slid it into his pocket. He told himself it was to keep it safe, but the truth was sharper. He didn't want her to know he'd seen it. Not yet. He closed the bag the way he'd found it, set it back under the chair, the strap looped over the leg. Then he leaned back, listening to the wind slip under the eaves. Hours passed in that stillness. She stirred once, pulling the blanket tighter, but didn't wake. The baby shifted in her swaddle, let out a small sound, then went quiet again. When he finally moved to bank the fire, the room was thick with shadows. He stood at the window, looking toward the barn. The shape of it against the night seemed different somehow. The angle of the roof sharper, the dark between the boards deeper. He thought of the letter again, the way the words seemed written for more than one set of eyes. Was Eleanor writing to the woman on his floor, or to the child in the chair, or to someone else entirely? Someone who hadn't yet arrived, but would, when the time was right. He didn't have answers. What he had was the feel of the paper still warm from his hands, and the knowledge that he'd crossed into something he couldn't step out of without tearing it open further. By the time he lay down, the fire was no more than a dull glow. She slept on, her breathing even. He closed his eyes, the words looping in his mind, blood or silence. In the dark, he realized he hadn't decided which one he'd choose. She woke to the sound of paper shifting, the faint rasp of it being flattened on the table. The fire was down to embers, painting the walls in a low orange glow. He sat in the chair, elbows on his knees, holding the letter she thought she'd buried deep at the bottom of her bag. Her voice was raw from sleep. "You went through my things." He didn't look up. "I found this. Number you were looking for it." He turned the paper so the words caught the light. Eleanor, a child taken, a man who promised to keep her safe, a debt to be paid in blood or silence. You want to tell me what this is? She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, eyes on the folded cloth in the chair where the baby slept. "There's nothing in there you don't already know." "I didn't know you worked for them," he said. "I did." "How long?" "Long enough to see what I wasn't meant to." His gaze stayed on her. "And the baby. She's the proof." He let the letter drop to the table. "Proof of what?" "That they don't own everything they think they do." "You're saying she's yours." "I'm saying she's not theirs." "That's the same thing to them." "I know," she said. He tapped the letter once. "This isn't a fight you win. You keep her, you lose your life." Her eyes didn't blink. "And if I lose her, I've already lost my life." He shook his head slowly. "You think they'll just take her and walk away? They'll make sure no one remembers you even had her." "I don't care what they remember. I care that she's not raised in that house." He looked toward the baby, the star stitched into her swaddle like a claim. "We can't keep both. The child and our lives. One of them has to be traded." Her hands gripped the blanket hard. "Then trade mine." "That's not what I'm saying." "That's what I'm saying." He pushed back from the table, standing. "You want me dead too. I want you to decide what side you're on." He turned toward the fire, staring into the coals. "There's no side. There's only staying ahead of them or getting caught. Then we run. They'll follow. Let them." He looked over his shoulder. "You've never seen what they do when they catch someone." "I have," she said, voice flat. "That's why I can't give her up." The air between them seemed to tighten. He came back to the table, resting his hands on it. "You think you can keep her hidden forever?" "Long enough." Long enough for what? For her to grow up without them. He searched her face, trying to see the shape of the plan she thought she had. You're asking me to give up everything for a child that isn't mine. She's yours now. You married me. That wasn't part of the deal. It is now. The baby stirred, letting out a small sound. She rose, crossed the room, lifted her. The swaddle shifted, and the stitched star caught the light. They'll know we've got her, he said. They already know, she answered. He sat back down, rubbing a hand over his face. We could hand her over, make a bargain, buy time. Time for what? To find a way to hurt them back. Her arms tightened around the child. I don't bargain with people who steal children. You think you're the first to try? But I might be the last to stop. He stared at her for a long moment, then at the letter still lying on the table. You're going to get us both killed. Maybe, she said, but you'll die, knowing you didn't hand her over. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. And if it comes down to them or me? You already know the answer. He got up, pacing once to the window. The yard was dark, the barn a shadow against the deeper black of the ridge. If we leave tonight. No trail, no questions. Her voice was steady. Then we leave tonight. He came back to the table, picking up the letter. And if they catch us, we make it cost them. The fire popped, ash tumbling in the grate. He slid the letter into his pocket, the paper warm from his hands. You've been carrying this a long time. Too long. The baby yawned, eyes fluttering closed again. She rocked her gently, not looking at him. When the moon's high, he said. She nodded once. Neither of them spoke after that. The only sound in the cabin was the quiet breath of the child, small and steady, as the night pressed in close and the fire sank lower, leaving more shadow than light. The house sat at the far edge of the square, larger than anything else for miles, its porch lined with white columns that caught the late light. He left the horse at the hitching rail and climbed the steps without knocking. The man at the door took one look at him, then stepped aside. Word traveled fast in towns like this. Inside, the air smelled faintly of tobacco and roast meat. Footsteps carried from the back room, measured, deliberate. The governor appeared, his frame broad, his hair silver at the temples. He didn't offer a hand. You've come to talk, he said. I have. Privately, the governor led him down a hall to a dining room where a long table waited. Dishes were set, steam curling from a platter of meat, bread still warm. Eat, the governor said, taking his place at the head. I didn't come for food. Then sit, and you'll talk better. He sat halfway down the table, the plate in front of him untouched. The governor poured 2 glasses of dark liquor, sliding one down the polished wood. You've got something to say. I can tell by the way you're looking at me instead of the meal. He reached into his coat, pulled out the folded letter, and set it in the space between them. The governor's eyes flicked down, his hand stilled on the knife he'd been using to cut the meat. Where'd you get that? The governor asked. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. I'm not here to satisfy your curiosity, he said. I'm here to tell you the child it talks about isn't yours. The governor's gaze sharpened. You've got her. He didn't answer. That's bold, the governor went on. Bolder still to come here and admit it. I didn't admit anything. You didn't have to. The governor leaned back, glass in hand. You're married to the woman, aren't you? That's right. She was always headstrong. She's not here to be discussed. She's here in this letter, isn't she? He didn't blink. I'm telling you now, she and the child aren't part of your estate anymore. The governor smiled without warmth. Everything on my land, everything under my roof, is mine until I say otherwise. That hasn't changed. It changes now. Is that a threat? It's a fact. The governor took a long drink, then set the glass down with a soft thud. You want money? No. You should. You could leave with enough to disappear, both of you. Never have to look over your shoulder. And the child. She'd be raised properly. She'd be raised and owned. The governor's jaw tightened. You think you can keep her safe? You've been here long enough to know how far my reach goes. I'm not interested in your reach. You should be. Roads are long out here. Accidents happen. A man can ride into the hills and never come back. He let the words settle, his own voice steady when he spoke. If something happens to me, that letter finds its way into the right hands. The governor's eyes narrowed. You've made copies? Enough. For the first time, the governor's hand left the knife entirely. He sat back, studying the man across from him. "You're not bluffing." "No." The governor's smile returned, thin and without joy. "Then you're not as stupid as you look." "Glad we agree." They sat in the quiet for a moment, the only sound the faint tick of the clock on the mantel. The governor reached for the bread, tore off a piece, and chewed slowly. "You'll find," he said finally, "that lonely roads are just as dangerous for women and children. They won't be on them alone." The governor nodded once like the matter was settled, though both of them knew it wasn't. "Finish your drink, then get out." He didn't touch the glass. He stood, leaving the letter where it lay. "That's yours now. A reminder." "I don't need reminders." "You will," he said, and walked out. The man at the door was gone. The street outside was empty except for the horse waiting at the rail. He mounted, the leather creaking under him, and turned toward the ridge. The sun was low, shadows long across the road. He kept his eyes forward, but the governor's voice carried in his mind. Every word weighted. By the time he reached the bend, the house was just a pale shape behind him. He didn't look back. It started with the smell. Not the dry sweetness of hay, but the sharp, biting scent of smoke cutting through the cool night air. He was half asleep on the cot when it reached him. By the time he sat up, the glow was already flickering against the window. He was out the door before his boots were fully on. The barn's roofline was edged in fire, the boards snapping like bones in the heat. Smoke rolled thick into the night, the flames climbing fast. "Marla!" he shouted, but the wind carried his voice sideways. He pulled the door wide and stepped into the choking dark. Heat wrapped around him instantly, the kind that made the skin pull tight. The air tasted of ash. He coughed hard, eyes stinging, pushing forward through the haze. Somewhere above, a beam groaned. Hay shifted under his boots. "Marla!" he called again. "I'm here." Her voice was muffled but close. He moved toward it, ducking low to breathe in what little air was left. The lantern light he'd carried guttered in the heat, barely showing him the ladder to the loft. He climbed fast, the rungs warm under his hands. She was at the far end, crouched against the wall, the baby cradled tight in her arms. The fire was already chewing at the beams above her. "We have to go," he said. "I'm not leaving her," she said, clutching the child closer. "You leave her, you leave yourself." He shot back. "I mean it," she said, her voice steady even through the smoke. He stepped forward, took her elbow, pulling her toward the ladder. She moved then, slow at first, then faster, when a section of the roof gave way behind them with a roar, sparks raining down like hot dust. The ladder swayed under their weight as they climbed down. He kept one hand at her back, guiding her feet onto the floor. The air was worse here, the smoke thicker, but the open door was ahead. They ran for it, boots sliding on the hay. The heat at their backs grew sharper. Outside, the cold night air hit like water. They didn't stop until they were clear of the falling embers. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, the baby still tight in her arms, rocking her as if motion alone could keep her safe. He bent over, hands on his knees, coughing until his chest hurt. When he straightened, his eyes caught movement beyond the fire. A man on horseback, just past the reach of the light, sat watching. The flames danced across the lines of his coat, the brim of his hat low over his eyes. They looked at each other across the burning space. The rider didn't move at first, just sat there, still as a post, the horse shifting under him. Then he turned, slow, and rode off toward the ridge. "Who was that?" she asked, following his gaze. "Don't know," he said, though the answer sat heavy in his gut. They stood there until the barn gave a final groan, and part of the roof caved in, sending a wave of sparks into the night sky. "We'll need to move her," he said. She nodded, her eyes still on the road where the rider had gone. "Soon." "Tonight," he said. She didn't argue. They were packing before the sky even thought about turning gray. He moved through the cabin without sound, folding blankets, pulling what little food they had into a canvas sack. She worked beside him, her motions quick, practiced, the baby strapped close against her chest. Every so often she glanced at the window like she expected the knock to come before they could finish. "You know where we're going?" he asked. "Yes." "How far?" "A day if we don't stop." "Across the border." His eyes lifted to hers. "And when we cross." "They can't touch us there. White stars don't hold sway past it." He didn't ask why. Some things didn't need the answer until you were standing on the ground itself. They stepped outside into the brittle cold, the frost crunching under their boots. He loaded the sacks onto the horse, tied them down tight. She stood with her back to the road, keeping the baby turned from the wind. The first stretch was quiet, the hooves striking dull against the frozen dirt. The ridge loomed ahead, a darker line against the pale horizon. He kept his eyes forward, scanning for movement. It came just before they reached the bend. A figure in the road, still as stone, the sun not yet high enough to touch him. The sheriff. He sat his horse like he'd been there all night, reins loose in his hand. The badge on his chest caught what little light there was. "Mornin'," the sheriff said. "Move aside," the man answered. "Not yet." The air felt tighter, as if the road itself had narrowed. "You're leaving early," the sheriff said. "Must be important." "Just riding." The sheriff's eyes dropped to the bundle on her chest. "That's not yours to keep." She shifted her grip, the baby's head tucked under her chin. "She's mine." The sheriff's hand slid down toward his holster, slow but certain. "You know how this goes." "I do," she said. "Then hand her over." "No." The sheriff's gaze moved to the man. "You've got sense. Don't let her make you do something you can't take back." He kept his seat. "We're not handing her over." The sheriff's fingers rested on the grip of the gun now, the weight of it visible even in the cold air. "You think you can outrun this? You think the ridge will keep you?" "It's not the ridge keeping us," the man said. "What then?" "Her will." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That's not enough." "Maybe it is," the man said. The wind moved through the grass at the edges of the road, the only sound for a long moment. "You've got until I count 3, the sheriff said. She stepped her horse forward before he could start. "Count and see what happens." The sheriff studied her, then the man, then the bundle again. His hand stayed where it was, but he didn't draw. "You've got a trail ahead of you. Don't expect it to be clear." "We don't," she said. He pulled his reins, the horse sidestepping just enough to open the road. "Ride then." They did, moving past him without a word. She kept her eyes on the horizon, but he glanced back once. The sheriff was still there, watching until the bend swallowed him. They didn't slow until the ridge was behind them. The air different somehow, sharper but lighter. She exhaled, the sound almost a laugh, though it didn't carry any joy. "You think he'll follow?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Then we keep riding." They did. They didn't speak for the first mile after the sheriff let them pass. The horse's hooves struck dull against the hard road, each step carrying the weight of what hadn't happened but could have. No gunfire, no blood, just the sheriff's voice trailing after them, that quiet warning sinking deeper than a threat. They kept riding until the ridge fell behind them, the trail narrowing into a ribbon of pale dirt. The cold is a bit sharper out here, the wind carrying the scent of cedar and dry grass. He kept glancing back, not because he expected to see the sheriff, but because he wanted to be sure they weren't already shadows on the horizon. At night they slept in hollows and thickets, the fire too small to see from a distance. The baby hardly cried, her breaths light against the fabric she was wrapped in. Marla held her close even in sleep, as if loosening her grip for a moment might be all it took for someone to pull her away. On the third day, they crossed a stretch of open plain, with no cover for half a mile in any direction. He pushed the pace, his hand resting near the rifle at his saddle. She rode behind, her eyes fixed ahead, not on the land, but on the space just beyond it. "How much farther?" he asked. "Not far." "You've been saying that." "Since morning." "Because it's been true since morning." By the fourth sunrise, the ground began to change. The soil darkened, the air lost its bite, and the wind carried a dampness that hadn't been there before. She pointed to a crooked line of pale stones running across the earth. "That's it," she said. "That's the border. That's the line that says they don't own what's past it." He studied the stones. No guards, no fence, just a mark for those who knew where to look. She stepped down from her horse and crossed over without pause. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I've been sure since before you knew my name." He led the horse across. Something in the air shifted. Not in temperature, not in scent, but in weight. It sat different in his chest, like he'd been holding his breath without realizing it. They rode on until they found a clearing tucked between two low hills. Grass stretched wide, dotted with patches of late-blooming wildflowers. She laid a blanket down and unwrapped the baby, setting her in the sunlight. The child blinked, kicked, her small hands reaching toward nothing and everything. She's never been anywhere like this. Marla said. She won't remember, he told her. She'll feel it, she said, watching the baby's feet press against the blanket. He stayed standing at the edge of the clearing, scanning the hills. The line of stones was long out of sight now, but he could still feel it behind them, a point they'd crossed that didn't erase the road they'd taken to get there. You think he'll follow? She asked without looking away from the baby. Maybe not right away, but someday. He nodded once. Someday. The baby made a small sound, half a laugh, half a whimper. Marla leaned over, smoothing a hand along her cheek. The sound still. He crouched beside them, resting one hand in the grass. She doesn't know yet. Know what? That this place doesn't mean the past is gone. It's just waiting for the right moment to find us again. Her hand brushed his. Then we make sure it never gets the moment. For a while, they said nothing. The wind moved slowly through the grass, the sun warming their faces. He watched the horizon the way he always had, not to see what was coming, but to measure how far trouble would have to ride to reach them. She lay back beside the baby, letting the child kick against the sky. For the first time since they'd left the cabin, she looked at ease. But he knew the difference between ease and safety. The road beyond stretched further than either of them could see, and it was never empty for long.